Hello. Rescue teams in Thailand say 4 out of the 12 boys trapped in a cave complex in the north of the country have been rescued. The boys and their coach have spent 2 weeks underground. A major rescue operation involving a team of international divers and military personnel will resume early on Monday morning local time. The complicated operation, escorting each child through submerged and narrow caves, didn't take as long as expected, but there will now be a gap of about 10 hours as the rescue teams rest and preparations are made for the next phase. So let's take a look back at the day's events now with this report from Simon Jones.
Ambulances arrive at hospital, one of the first signs that hours into this unprecedented operation, the first boys have been rescued after being trapped for more than 2 weeks. These are some of the rescuers emerging into the darkness, the first part of their mission accomplished. This had been named D-Day by the authorities, who declared the boys and their coach were ready to move. And with fears of rising waters, officials decided they could wait no longer.
I
would like to inform the public at home and those who have been giving us support all along. After 16 days, today's the day we've been waiting for. We are seeing the boys in the flesh now.
The boys were said to be determined and focused, physically and mentally fit. Expert divers have been guiding them out through darkness and submerged passageways towards the mouth of the cave. It's involved a mixture of walking, wading, climbing and diving. Their families agreed they should be moved as soon as possible. The emergency vehicles near the cave entrance showed progress had been made. The first group out quicker than expected. The operation is now over for the day, but it will resume come daylight. The relief that the first boys have been rescued, tempered with the knowledge of the challenges still ahead. Simon Jones, BBC News.
Well, our correspondent Nick Beak is at the Chiang Rai Hospital, where we believe, Nick, the boys were brought to. Just take us through the sequence of events.
Yeah, Luquessa, it's late in the evening here in this part of northern Thailand, and it's at this hospital tonight that the doctors and nurses have the responsibility of looking after these 4 boys, the first to be brought out as part of this extraordinary rescue operation. They were ready and they were primed, and earlier this evening the first patient arrived. We saw an ambulance race to this place. They went straight to the main entrance. A short time later there was a second ambulance arrive. After that, we heard the helicopter overhead and then a 4th helicopter, and those 2 boys brought into another entrance. We believe they've undergone checks this evening. They had a plan in place for basic checks, so blood tests, urine tests, looking to see if they picked up any sort of infection in the water or underground over the past weeks. Because remember, it's been more than a fortnight now that they were trapped in this cave, and how they would be plucked to safety looked extremely difficult indeed. But we know tonight 4 boys are here and they're being looked after.
Do we know if their family have been able to visit?
That is something we don't know. Certainly the family have been kept up to date with the latest information. The family kept almost a 24/7 vigil at the site, at the cave complex where the boys were trapped, probably about an hour by car from here. We're not sure where the family members are tonight. You'd imagine, wouldn't you, that they are inside with the boys if they're able to see them. But of course, just 4 boys of the 12 who went into the cave have been brought out so far. So potentially for 4 families this evening, the most incredible sense of relief and joy. But for 8 other families, the wait continues, and of course their football coach as well, he still remains in there.
Nick, I'm just looking at life, continuing behind you with the traffic, and like you say, it is late. What's the local reaction been around the hospital and within Chiang Rai? What have they been saying about this story?
Well, people have been delighted because they appreciated just how difficult this rescue operation would be. I think the authorities here have made that clear. They've talked about the best time to try and launch this operation, to try and go for it at the best possible time when the rain wasn't falling heavily, and of course the big fear was that monsoon season was on the way. So I think there is a palpable sense of relief among the authorities, some of the police and the security forces here have been involved in this, but also local people too. But they're not getting carried away. There was a huge moment of excitement last Monday when the boys were found, but they are very mindful that fewer than a third of the party that went into the cave 2 weeks ago have been brought to safety. So at the moment I describe the mood as being one of cautious optimism, but they appreciate just how difficult this is. And when you think about the route that the boys had to take out, some of the best cave divers in the world, it took them 11 hours to get there and back. So the fact they've been brought to safety in this way is extraordinary, and obviously in the coming days and weeks we'll hear more about what has been a phenomenally complicated and unprecedented operation.
Nick Beak at Chiang Rai Hospital, where those boys are being looked after, the first of the 12 boys, 4 boys. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to the site of those caves, Tam Luang. Near the exit is Dan Johnson, our correspondent. Dan, it appears that it's been described as a war with water and time has been won for now.
Yes, well, they're certainly making good progress, and this has given everybody more hope, the fact that they've at least been able to bring the first 4 out via this method of essentially teaching them to scuba dive and then guiding them out through those underwater passages to the entrance of the cave. Such a long journey, such a complicated task, but at least there is proof now that it is possible, and hopefully the rest will follow tomorrow. Everything's quietened down here for this evening. It's raining quite heavily, and most of the rescue workers and the support team left the site in the last hour or so. So things here quiet now, although still a bit of movement, fresh equipment being brought in all the time, but they are expected to renew the effort tomorrow once everyone's had a bit of rest and is able to come back feeling fresh and able to get on with the job of bringing the remaining 8 boys and the coach out from that cave. But everyone now at least hopeful that it is possible, because the first 4 are out and receiving treatment.
Dan, I know it's been a very busy day for you, but little concerned that you can see the rain coming down behind you. What is the weather forecast? Because this really will affect rescue operations.
Yes, this is what the officials in charge of the rescue always feared, that it would start raining really heavily and that would increase the water level in the cave, possibly putting the boys at risk, because if the water level went up any further, they would run out of space to stay clear of the water. Now, they said that they had a window of weather in the last couple of days, and that's why they chose today to start this rescue attempt. The man in charge of the operation said it's D-Day, and that underlines just how daring this rescue attempt is. But perhaps this shows you why they needed to at least get started. And he has made clear that if the water levels in the cave do start rising, and there is a risk to the boys and the coach who are still in there, they do have an emergency evacuation plan that they can bring forward to move people out even more quickly. But if the rain doesn't affect the water level inside the cave too quickly, too much, then it looks like they're going to carry on at the steady pace they've approached this job with during the day, taking care, taking time, making sure that it's done safely, because it's such a complicated task and there is still a lot of risk, a lot of uncertainty associated with it. Everyone here is well aware that at least one man has lost his life during this rescue attempt, an experienced Navy diver who had probably got some experience of cave diving. These boys don't have that benefit. They've only had the advice and the training that they've been able to receive in the cave over the last few days from the international cave diving experts who've come here. And it's those experts who need to be back on scene tomorrow, feeling fresh, able to concentrate, able to give this their full attention and determination to make sure that the rest of the group gets out safely.
And this is a huge operation internationally, isn't it? I mean, the Thai Navy SEALs, that the world has been watching their Facebook page closely. They bid the world goodbye a couple of hours ago. But we're talking 90 divers here involved from around the world. Just briefly summarise what is involved, please.
Yes, I think everyone's actually being impressed by the Thai Navy's candid acceptance that it didn't have the experience and the expertise needed to pull off this job. There are lots of Navy people here, lots of soldiers and military personnel backing up the team, but they've accepted the international help that has been offered, the experts who have come here to volunteer their expertise and experience to actually formulate an effective rescue plan and then carry it out. And I think we will learn over the next few days and weeks probably exactly how much this rescue attempt has relied on the experience of some really determined blokes in the main who do this, most of them as their hobby. They go around the world trying to find the most difficult caves to dive and actually pulling off that job of getting to where they want to be deep in those caves. It's that sort of experience and expertise. Certainly not a glamorous job, probably not the sort of hobby that people think is especially popular. It's a remarkable feat that they are pulling off here, but it's their experience and expertise, the close supervision that they have been giving those boys to guide them out with the skills that they've given them over the last few days. That is what will make this a success. But everyone knows there's still a long way to go yet.
Indeed. Dan Johnson, thank you very much indeed. And just to remind you that we have members from the United States, Australia, Thailand, the UK, China and Europe, all part of this rescue team operation. Now, earlier I spoke to Jeff Crossley. He's a cave diving instructor. Now, he was actually one of the divers who rescued two men from a cave in Yorkshire back in 1992. He told me that the rescue team seemed to have done very well so far, but there remain significant challenges ahead.
It's absolutely wonderful news, but it's not over yet. And you've got to be cautiously optimistic that when they go back in to resume the rescue operation, that things will continue to go well.
In terms of conditions, are they very similar around the world once you get inside a cave, or do they differ?
They do differ from country to country. I would say that from what I'm hearing from the Thai operation, they're actually quite similar to British conditions in that you get poor visibility and there are some small passages as well. The one perhaps good thing about the conditions over there is that it's warm. It certainly wouldn't be warm over here, but that's been a big plus in helping to get the boys out.
You rescued Les Hewitt back in 1992. The team here, or rather the team in Thailand, are having to rescue children. What would be your primary concern if you were part of that team?
Well, I think that it was a very big team effort to rescue Les and another caver, Roy Dean, at the time. And I think with children, again, I think your correspondent said it already, that it's prioritising who's the weakest, who needs to go out first, who's confident probably, who are the most confident boys. So it would be a case of putting them in the water probably with the equipment attached to them and giving them a trial run, not under the actual flooded part of the cave, but in the water where they are. And I think they would have worked all that out and then split them into groups to decide who was going to be the best to take out first and then carry on from there. And it appears that's what the case is, where they've now suspended operations because it is a very stressful experience searching for missing persons in a flooded cave. And then when you find them, after the initial euphoria, you realise that they're not actually rescued until they're all out. So I would say that they've obviously got a plan. They're sticking to that plan, and they'll resume again tomorrow, and hopefully it'll continue to be successful.
As a rescuer, Jeff, what goes through your mind? What pressures are you under?
Well, you've also got to think about your own safety, to be honest. But it is, as I've just said, it's a very stressful time when you are trying to get somebody out and you're trying to be positive all the time. But you know there are serious dangers. So I think it's very much a case of focus on your own safety as well, but remain very, very positive for the casualty to give them the confidence to get out.
So what sort of warning signs are you looking for then? I mean, we know that the weakest boys were taken out first, but doesn't that increase the risk? What health signs are you keeping your eyes out for?
Well, I mean, that's difficult to say for me. I mean, I'd be speculating there really regarding health signs. Certainly, from my experience on the rescues that I've been involved with, we would maintain, we would try and maintain visual contact, eye contact, by almost swimming backwards with the ones that we brought out, 2 divers per casualty, and just looking at the eyes, keeping them focused, and then but watching for more signs of panic rather than medical issues. If the water's, I think it's quite shallow, so that again is a good thing. If the water's very deep, then it does become more of an issue physiologically.
Was the cave diving instructor who was speaking to me earlier, Jeff Crossley. So let's remind our viewers of our developing story today. 4 of the 12 boys that have been trapped in a flooded cave in Thailand have been brought out. A major operation involving international divers and elite members of the Thai Navy has been taking place to free the 12 boys and their football coach. Now, they became stranded a fortnight ago when the tunnels became waterlogged by rain. It is monsoon season there. Now, British divers found the group sheltering on a rocky ledge around 2.5 miles from the mouth of the cave on Monday. The vast cave network stretches around 10 kilometres into the mountain, and the flooded tunnel is 1 mile underwater. Now, the first boy was brought out of the cave at around midday. It was actually 5:40 local time, just to get that accurately. And then all of the 4 rescued boys are being treated in hospital, initially taken to a field hospital close to the cave entrance. Now, rescue efforts have been paused overnight. It's going to allow divers to prepare for the next mission. Meanwhile, the rain that the rescue team have been dreading appears to have arrived. Well, Amy Sawita-Lefebvre is the Reuters Bangkok Deputy Bureau Chief. She spoke to me earlier and she said that the attention of the whole country has been focused on the mission.
Yes, it's certainly one of the biggest story in years for Thailand, and it's a good news story so far. It's definitely a story that's brought this country together, a country that's been divided politically for many, many years. A big story, but also a good one.
Have you, whilst you've been there or in your memory, can you remember any story which has involved this level of rescue and this cooperation internationally? And also there's been a lot of military involvement in this operation.
I don't think we've seen anything on this scale in recent Thai history, really. It's been a huge operation, 1,000+ Thai volunteers, that's just Thai volunteers, and teams flying in from all over the world, Britain, Australia, the US, Japan, to name just a few. And the level of coordination involved over the past 2 weeks has been something that has been truly amazing. We've heard international teams commend the Thais for their effort, and vice versa as well. And I don't think the country's seen anything like this before.
So what have local press been saying and how have they been covering this story?
Well, the coverage here has been pretty much blanket coverage, non-stop. And when you go out into the streets, whether it's here in the capital, Bangkok, or elsewhere, pretty much everyone in Thailand is talking about these boys. And they have been talking about these boys ever since they were first trapped inside the cave. And of course, the big highlight when the 2 British divers found the boys last week, last Monday, which was news that was met with a huge positive reaction, avalanche of goodwill on social media. So it's something that's really brought Thais together at this time.
I'd just like to know, how big is this sport of caving in the country?
Well, it is fairly popular in parts of the country, but it's definitely not a national level sport. It's not something that many people do. In fact, cycling is perhaps one of the biggest sports in Thailand. And of course, these boys who went in weren't expert cavers. They'd been in the cave before during dry season. This is the first time that they've gone in during rainy season. So they weren't experts by any stretch of the imagination.
It was the Deputy Bureau Chief of Reuters speaking to me earlier. Well, I've also been speaking to Lieutenant Colonel Steve Whitlock, who was part of a 2004 rescue mission in one of the world's biggest cave systems in Mexico City.
It's good news that we're starting to see people come out of the cave, but it's not over until it's over. You go through a period of seeing success, but the rescue isn't over until all of the people are out of the cave, including the rescuers. So there's a way to go yet, but it is really good news that we're starting to see people come through those difficult passages and get out of that cave. But I would caution people just to be, a little bit careful because we've still got an awful lot of people that have got to come out of that cave, and obviously we've still yet to see the remaining members of the team to come through.
OK, so you've been part of a rescue team, as I said earlier, took place in Mexico City. How closely does that event resemble what we're seeing now in Thailand?
Well, in some ways it's very similar. So we rescued a group of 6 cavers from a similar situation who was sunk in the cave. The big difference was that it was part of a contingency plan. Although it was a rescue, we were aware that that cave flooded. We'd had a data logger in that particular cave for 3 years before we actually went in there, and we knew it flooded to the roof. So we had a camp already set up in case of emergency. We had lines laid to allow those people to come out through that cave. And we also had Rick and another a diver on standby in the UK should that happen. So the difference was we were slightly more prepared because we knew that particular cave flooded.
I mean, there are so many teams from around the world involved in this. Well, I don't want to say that, but in terms of cave diving, where do you go first for expertise?
Well, the obvious answer for me was Rick Stanton. And we knew that nearly 14 years ago, and the situation hasn't really changed, although there are some really good cave divers all over the world, but it's quite a close-knit community. And is there a number where you can dial for a cave dive rescue? Probably not. So it's an interesting thought. But if you're sort of caving at the level that we certainly were in Mexico, there were enough members of my team that understood who to ring, and obviously we'd arranged that beforehand.
OK, we're hearing a lot about a plan, a diving plan. What's involved in one of those? Can you just take us through?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you need to know the cave in detail, and Rick would have done that when he first moved in to find those, to find the members of the team. But you would need to find how long you were submerged, how complex that cave system is. And we've seen a lot on the news about how tight it was and how difficult it was. And that would have been a big part of the plan. Can you move people in there? And of course, the other thing you've got to consider is the safety of the rescuer. Because if you're moving somebody through an environment like that who's not used to it, then it's as dangerous for the rescuer as it is for the person being rescued, particularly if that person starts to panic, loses the line, or even worse, gets everybody disorientated. So all of that needs to be considered, and you need to train for it. I mean, we trained on the far side of the sump. I hadn't trained members of the team that I had before we went to Mexico, those people that were trapped. But before we dived them through, we trained them in the cave, in water, to make sure that we understood how they reacted before we even considered bringing them out using diving.
That was Lieutenant Colonel Steve Whitlock speaking to me earlier. Andy Evis is the former head of the British Cave Diving Association, and he told me he was very encouraged by how the mission had gone so far.
I think it's absolutely wonderful that they've got 4 out safely, and it suggests, with a great deal of luck and not too much rain, that they can get the other 9 out. So fingers crossed. But the great moment last week was actually getting through and finding the boys and finding all 13 of them alive. That was a wonderful, wonderful moment. And the second wonderful moment was getting the first of them out intact and looking pretty good. I mean, in between, unfortunately, there was this dreadful disaster of the Thai diver dying, and it just underlines the danger that there is with this type of operation. And the cave divers do realise this situation, and they will be being very, very careful and very cool and calm and collected And you were asking earlier what they'll be doing in this period. They'll be resting. I hope that they will get as much rest as they possibly can to enable them to go back in and perform their operation both safely for themselves and safely for the people they're rescuing.
Andy Evis there, he's the former head of the British Caving Association. So just to remind you then that 4 of the 12 boys that have been trapped in that caving system in northern Thailand have been brought out. They've been transferred to a local hospital for treatment. The actual rescue operation has now been put on hold for 10 hours to allow the rescue team to rest and prepare before they resume the operation tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. local time. Do stay with us. You're watching BBC News.
Hello there. With temperatures in California